Casey Johnson calls moving Zach LaVine a focal point by the organization. We're going to talk about why that may be the case. We're also going to look at how the rumored deal to DeMar DeRozan has part of the right and wrong mindset at the same time. It could signify that something that a lot of Bulls fans are calling for, probably not going to happen, even though it wasn't going to happen either way. And then we'll really break down the comments from AK about Lonzo not having any setbacks and what that could mean for the Chicago Bulls and their cap space this upcoming season. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. And so, on an episode of Bulls Talk, NBC Bulls Talk yesterday, Casey Johnson mentioned that moving Zach LaVine is a organizational focal point. And I think there's a lot to kind of unpack with that. And a lot of different things that could mean for the Chicago Bulls. Now, let's first start off on why is moving Zach LaVine, or theoretically, right? Take everything with a grain of salt. Don't take anything with a one for one. But why would moving Zach LaVine be a focal point of the organization? It makes a lot of sense, right? For a team that has clearly said we want major change, moving the largest contract on your team would bring about the most change. It would affect your cap space. It would potentially affect how you flesh out the rest of that roster, right? Considering that nobody's expecting the Bulls to get equal value back, like a player that's of Zach LaVine's caliber back in a trade. I mean, unless AK works something crazy out, we know that, he's explored it. He's called for Darius Garland, other players to kind of see what that value is going to be. But more than likely, from what we know now, and I want to leave it open that could very well change in the offseason, you just never know, is that it seems like the Bulls, the most they're going to get back is maybe some picks, probably protected if I'm not mistaken. But then you're probably going to get a lot of salary cap matching, and some quality depth pieces, right? That's what we heard at one point, is the Bulls were kind of looking more so at players that help kind of support what the Bulls have going on. And so with a team, with the Bulls being, as we talked about yesterday, being so up close to the luxury tax as what the Chicago Bulls are, right? Getting and being able to kind of get players, role players around the core of what you're trying to build around here in place, like breaking up Zach LaVine's contract over multiple players. It helps with the Bulls' depth. It helped with the Bulls kind of having more manageable salaries. And honestly, it actually puts the Bulls in a better position to make other deals down the road. Let's say this, if you do get back Zach LaVine's $42 million, let's say you get back 3 players to spread that money out over. If the Bulls do make a subsequent deal, maybe even later in the offseason or at the trade deadline, having kind of more broken up salaries that make it easier to match other things. If AK truly plans on having this season of being a willing and dealing season, it allows for that to kind of happen more organically. So that's the first thing that it makes sense. And it on top of netting you the most assets back, which also is the best thing, it does kick off that offseason of major change that AK talked about. So, ultimately it still, remains to be seen kind of how aggressive AK really is going to be with how close the Bulls up or to the luxury tax. As I said yesterday, it's either going to be a lot of moves or it's going to be not very many at all, and we're going to be running mainly the same team back. But if AK's action matches the words he said in the season-ending presser, I think it's going to come down to you're going to have to put yourself in a position to make a lot of deals. So, the Bulls being right up to the luxury tax, it helps that a lot. And also, if the Bulls' goal is keeping DeMar DeRozan this offseason, which making him a 2-year, $80 million offer, which we'll talk about here in a few, if that's true, if that's what they did and that's truly their mindset, it does help facilitate keeping DeMar DeRozan. Now, the question with that is that if you sign DeMar DeRozan to a $40 million contract, you're sending Zach LaVine out on a $40 million contract, how much better are the Bulls realistically getting? How much are you changing your overall stock? But it really depends on what players you get back for Zach LaVine. Right now, Torrey Craig's probably going to use his player option to opt out of that deal. Andre Drummond's an unrestricted free agent. If in moving Zach LaVine back, you get 3 players back, you're now filling some of those roster spots on top of your first-round draft pick, 11th overall, that is projected to have right now as well. So those things definitely play a part as well. And then when you got to look at, when it comes to Zach LaVine, what teams would be interested? Now, I do think that teams could change. This list could very well change depending on how teams uh, fell out of the playoffs. I think that that's a big part of that. But for that, I want to kind of keep a look at teams with cap space. And the reason why I'm doing this, right, is that theoretically, I'm not saying a team that will absorb all of Zach LaVine's contract into their cap space, but I do want to look at teams that couldn't absorb at least portion of it. So maybe the Bulls don't have to take all of Zach LaVine's salary back, which would add them some spending power out in free agency. Kind of the goal is, and I talked a little bit about this over on Locked On, one of the goals I feel would be for this Bulls team is to create enough cap space in a Zach LaVine trade to where you're getting some more depth pieces back, but also you freed up enough of your luxury tax space to be able to use your full mid-level exception to add a player at that mid-level exception. Now, that could very well not be the goal of AK. AK could look at what he acquires in the Zach LaVine trade as basically a pseudo mid-level exception in the players that you get back. But I think, getting some spending power out in free agency so you can be a little bit of a player there kind of makes sense. Keep in mind, you could be over the salary cap, but as long as you have the space under the luxury tax to use your full mid-level exception, the Bulls will still use that, or part of it at least, to avoid that luxury tax. So when you look at teams with considerable cap space this offseason, the number one team is going to be the Detroit Pistons with $60 million in cap space. And the reason why I want to go back to that is that we know that the Detroit Pistons are rumored that the Detroit Pistons were interested in Zach LaVine at this trade deadline. Zach LaVine got hurt. It seems like the Pistons then sent out a lot of those assets in different deals instead of, acquiring Zach LaVine. But if that desire is still there by the Detroit Pistons, or that interest is still there in the Detroit Pistons, they could actually absorb most of Zach LaVine's salary right into it. They could theoretically absorb all of it, but and again, these figures that I'm getting are just the raw projected max cap space. I'm not getting into each team's cap holds and extensions and everything like that. I'm not getting into all that. That would be an hour-long episode. So, this is just the projected. And because they have a projected $60 million in cap space, that theoretically opens up them to absorb a portion of Zach LaVine's contract into their cap space and then send out some more salary that they don't want. Maybe they are still interested in sending out Jaden Ivey, some things like that. So that could be something on the horizon for the Bulls and a team that had rumored been interested before, right? Then next up, you have the 76ers with a projected cap space of $56 million. Now, the thing that makes it a little bit more interesting about the Philadelphia 76ers is they theoretically could have even more than that. They only have 3 players under contract. Well, 2 technically, but Tyrese Maxey, who has an option, I just don't see any world in which they don't pick up his option. So that projected $56 million in cap space by the Philadelphia 76ers, that can go up and down depending on other things they do. Now, we know that they are going to be trying to sign some big stars to that team, right? They're going to try to build a championship team around Joel Embiid. When you look at how well they've competed so far, even though they're 0-2 against the New York Knicks so far, that, they have Joel Embiid, Paul Reed, and then Tyrese Maxey also under contract as well next season. So this is a team that has the space to absorb Zach LaVine's contract. And if they strike out on the Paul Georges, if they can't acquire Donovan Mitchell or somebody else via trade, they could very well to pivot to Zach LaVine and look at that and say, hey, a scorer, we still got Tyrese Maxey here. We got a coach here. Maybe they think that he can buy in. But the Philadelphia 76ers are also an option. Now, the question with the Sixers are, what would the Sixers send out in exchange for Zach LaVine? Now, that's where it gets a little bit more, a little less straightforward than a team like the Orlando Magic, because the Philadelphia 76ers don't have very many players under contract. Now, they could work out a sign and trade. Could be a Tobias Harris sign and trade to come to the Chicago Bulls, maybe even a Buddy Hield sign and trade, which we do need some shooting off the bench, right? They could do something like that, but that would mean that those players have to want to come to Chicago, and there's no really foregone conclusion that that's going to be the case, right? So, that's something that the Bulls also have at their disposal potentially, but we don't know how that's going to work out. The 76ers also don't have a whole lot of first-round picks they can trade either, so that really, I think the first round pick they can trade outright, I believe, is 2030. So it's not like the Bulls are going to get a bunch of draft capital back either. So that may not be the most straightforward deal, but the amount of money that they can absorb of Zach LaVine's contract in the trade could make them interested, again, pending if they strike out on other things. Next up, the Utah Jazz with $37 million in projected cap space. Again, that changes based off some things. I don't necessarily know what the Jazz are doing. I'm not gonna lie to you. The Jazz are a team that looks like they're one move away from going kind of full rebuild, and they're well, again, I guess in a way because they already have, and they're one or two moves away from truly trying to compete in that Western Conference. So you really don't know. Could there be some interest there? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a Jazz fan. I don't have my finger on the pulse of the Utah Jazz, but hey, OKC Thunder, $35 million. I just don't see them being interested in Zach LaVine either. You know, they have a young core there that's all going to grow and develop together. Hell, they still have more draft picks coming in than roster spots over the next few years. So I doubt that's going to be on the horizon. The San Antonio Spurs with $27 million. Now, the Spurs are a team that is probably theoretically going to be looking for a point guard to pair with Victor Wembanyama down there. And I don't think that they're going to really be interested in Zach LaVine. So that really leaves the Orlando Magic with $18 million in cap space. Now, I do think that there is a world where the Magic could very well be interested in Zach LaVine. I think a couple of different things would have to go different ways. I think, them potentially losing Markelle Fultz this offseason, having Jonathan Isaac that really has turned into one of the better perimeter defenders in the NBA as well. I think that they could, and not to say that they could absorb all of it, but even them absorbing $10 million of Zach LaVine's contract and the Bulls only bringing back $30 million could really help the Bulls be able to use that mid-level exception as well. So that's kind of the teams that you're really looking at as being really kind of can absorb some of Zach LaVine's contract. Again, that's not like a list of the only teams that could be available because there are teams that could be willing to move off a salary or something else as we go forward into the offseason and maybe they strike out on some things in the playoffs and whatnot. So the Zach LaVine situation being a focal point by this front office to me means that that's one of the first things that they want to get done. Maybe as early as the draft, maybe between the draft and free agency. We'll see what happens there. But, it doesn't surprise me at all. I know some Bulls fans are still holding out hope that the Bulls will be able to bring Zach LaVine back and Zach LaVine and Kobe will be this dynamic backcourt. And I understand that, right? Especially on paper. But I think we kind of seen it. And we've heard more about the Bulls looking to move LaVine than keep LaVine. Doesn't always mean that it's 100% true. But I guess we'll see what happens with that. Now, something else that we've heard recently is the Bulls, offering DeMar DeRozan a 2-year, $80 million contract. And the thing with this deal is that it's the right years, but that amount is crazy. Now, that amount would only make sense if the Bulls do plan on moving Zach LaVine and they feel pretty confident that they are going to be able to move him this offseason. Because otherwise, giving DeMar DeRozan a $40 million contract means that even if all your moves this offseason are bringing DeMar and Patrick Williams back on a qualifying offer, you're in the luxury tax. And you still then would have 2 roster spots left open. And that's if you don't do anything with Zach. That's if you don't do anything with Zoe, which I guess maybe those can provide some more flexibility. But that's a dangerous game that the Bulls are playing. I do think, though, that hearing that this type of offer is made to DeMar DeRozan means that a full rebuild is not something that this team is interested in. And I say that to say this. And I know I kind of have to restate this every almost couple of weeks now for a lot of Bulls fans. And even the national media. Some people are still holding out hope that this Chicago Bulls team is going to go full rebuild when they keep telling you that they're not. And I understand that the comments from Arturis saying things like, oh, yeah, this group didn't get it done. We can't get it done with this group. We need to make changes has reinvigorated those hopes of a full rebuild by a lot of people. But guess what? When you hear somebody offering a 34-year-old veteran $40 million, guess what? You still plan on competing. You don't plan on going a full rebuild. And the thing with that is, outside of the full rebuild aspect of it or not, the thing that kind of stands out the most to me on this is that AK and Eversley have shown that they can come up with a really good plan A, right? A really good plan A. But adjusting to it or having a plan B if things go left with that plan A is where they've really failed at. That plan A, bringing in Zoe, Alex Caruso, Vooch, DeMar, and having a team that can compete in the East, right? Because I'm not sticking to that number 1 team in the East shit. That was a good plan A because had you been able to focus, if Lonzo did not go down and you were focused then on building out and fixing the flaws of that team over the last 2 off seasons, we're looking at this team very differently. But Lonzo went down. Vooch started to slide, and so far we've seen that there has been no plan B or recourse by AK and Eversley. So locking in the $40 million over DeMar DeRozan for 2 years, it's a short contract, so that is a benefit, right? But it tells me that they are still going for it. Their version of going for it. And it makes me a little concerned because you don't have much flexibility, at least over those 2 years, right? And maybe the Bulls are looking at it and saying, hey, the 2025 draft is going to be deep. The Spurs own our pick of its top 10 protected, which again would kind of be more of a case to if you don't think you can put a team out there that can truly be competitive, let yourself be bad for a year. But the lack of adjustments from AK is the thing that has me most concerned about this. Now, again, it's a 2-year deal. At the end of those 2 years, DeMar DeRozan's 36, going on 37 years old. At that point, you're definitely not paying him a max level money because keep in mind that the most that DeMar DeRozan can get a year is max that he can get on his contract is $44 million. You basically offered him what is tantamount to a max level contract. And so, yeah, albeit over 2 years. So I think that would just tell me that whatever plan they come up with this offseason, we're stuck in that plan for 2 years. Meaning if it goes right, if it goes wrong, we're stuck for another 2 years because I don't trust AK to have a plan B. He has not earned that right. Hell, most people, and I completely understand and commend them, don't even trust AK to come up with a plan A at this point. So the DeMar DeRozan rumored contract, which still could very well be a rumor, it does not mean that it's true. And I could very well be overreacting to something that actually is not going to happen either. But if that was truly the offer that was made by DeMar DeRozan, it shows that AK has the right mindset and the wrong mindset at the exact same time. And that is part of the problem here in Chicago is the not being able to commit to just one path, right, is the thing with this team that really has hurt this team so much. And, that type of deal really kind of signifies more of the same of that coming. And I guess we'll see the way that it shakes out, man. I said this is going to be the last offseason where I have faith in AK to a degree, right? It's not the blind faith. It's still the you got to show me faith, right? Like you did some things your first season and a half here. You got to Willen and Dillon. You showed a ability to reshape a roster. Now you got to do it again. And I'm giving you my faith that or a chance, I should say, more than faith. I'm giving you that chance to do it again. Not that me giving them a chance means anything because the person who's going to give them the true chance is Jerry Reinsdorf, and they're going to be here for quite a while as long as Reinsdorf has his way, right? So it's just interesting to watch a team kind of still try to, even in the midst of talking about change, still have a report that still shows you're still keeping one foot in one side and the other foot in the other side. You're still playing both sides. So we'll see what this offseason brings. Now, in what the offseason brings, still Lonzo Ball, which is always going to be a topic of conversation for the Bulls. We got a voicemail from Korn the other day. He said kind of it all starts with Zoe. We had a good conversation with that. Korn's one of the smartest basketball minds around, except for his love of D'Lo. But hey, that's another thing. But Lonzo Ball, one thing that I did not spend a lot of time talking about in AK's presser was him saying this. As far as Lonzo Ball, some of the workouts have been really, really positive, and he has progressed. He's responded well. Some of the things that the medical guys have shown me is he looks good moving. I'm just really happy for him personally for his progress. He has worked hard to put himself in this position, and hopefully he can continue his progress. Also in that saying that Lonzo Ball has suffered no setback, which is a major thing, right? And I want to add some clarity, as I always like to do in these situations, as much as I can. Lonzo Ball not having any setbacks still does not mean that he is going to come back as an impact player. It does not mean that he even is going to be cleared yet. We still got hurdles to clear in that. And I've seen people hope, wish, and think that Lonzo Ball is going to come back here and be right back to a starter. Now, Lonzo Ball, with his basketball IQ, is probably going to be able to find a way to adjust. But let's be clear here. A player out of basketball almost 3 years. 3 years almost it will be. I think 2 years and 9 months. I think it will be if Lonzo Ball is ready by opening day to take the floor again for the Chicago Bulls. That's how long it would be. On top of that, the injury that he had, while it has a bleak outlook, on top of everything else, he still is going to not start. He's still going to be on a heavy minutes restriction. He's still going to have pain management where he's just going to sit some days. And on top of that, not playing back-to-backs, the most games you're probably looking at Lonzo Ball playing is 45 to 50 games. And you're not going to thrust that back into your starting lineup for people that are still holding out hope. The Lonzo's going to come back and all of a sudden save this team from where it is. The pair with Kobe White and all of a sudden make this dynamic backcourt. Let me tell you, the chances of that are slim. Very, very, very slim. And the fact that AK still is not fully ruled out using the career-ending injury exception on Lonzo Ball should tell you that this front office still has doubts around how much Lonzo Ball is going to be able to come back. He is progressing, and that is great, and I hope that his progression continues to where he can continue living out his dream for playing basketball at the NBA level. I hope that that can happen. And if it does happen in the Chicago Bulls uniform and he comes back and makes a return, I'm not going to be mad at that. But we have to be clear here. Lonzo Ball not having no setbacks is a great statement and it's a great thing. But Lonzo Ball, even not suffering setbacks, getting on and then staying on an NBA court is a completely different prospect. And that's the thing that AK and Eversley have to look at as well in this offseason with the Lonzo Ball situation to determine how they can come out of that. But that's just my thoughts on it. You guys, as always, can let me know what you guys think down below. That's today's daily episode. Thank you for tuning in. We still stay daily over the offseason, but guys know typically we go about 20 minutes. The episodes are going to get shorter as the offseason goes on, probably a little bit between the end of the season and the draft. They get a little bit shorter. We'll have the draft things, but we'll still be delivering that daily content, so make sure you guys stay tuned in with the channel. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.